Transgenderism and the Catholic Church. Where does it stand? What does this mean? Can we even have a civil conversation about this? Well, side note, we're going to. Today on Happy Hour. Welcome back to Happy Hour, our podcast for young adults here at the Cathedral of the Most Sacred Heart of Jesus. I'm Rick.
And I'm Holly.
And I don't know, I started hearing the music and I calmed right down. It was great.
Yeah. I haven't heard the new intro music, so that was really lovely.
Yeah, isn't that great? It's got a little beat to it.
It has a little beachy vibe with the rainbow.
It's very summery.
Yes,
I don't know.
I
shook it up a little bit. Yeah?
Yeah, I like it.
Yeah, okay, good. Then maybe we'll stick with it. I still get strikes on it when I upload it to YouTube, though.
Oh, does it not?
Even though I paid for it.
Oh.
They still strike me.
Copyrighted, maybe.
But I paid for the copyright.
Oh, well.
I don't know. Issue. Technology. Yeah. I love it. Well, first, welcome back.
Thank you.
You weren't gone long.
Not too long, thankfully.
And since the last time we spoke and had a conversation, you might have some news for us.
I did graduate.
Congratulations!
Yay.
I feel like that is a that might even need, I don't know, some applause. Woohoo!
I'm very excited.
Oh, we're so excited for you. So now you've got your undergrad.
Yes.
Technically in what area?
In deaf education and special ed, and I'm continuing grad school. So I just started summer classes for it. So we're on to the next semester.
And we knew this was a possibility. We didn't know, however, where you were going to at the time we spoke last, I don't think. So everybody realized that this was probably going to be our last podcast together.
Wah, wah.
I think I have something for that. There it is. However...
I'm staying.
Hey! You get more applause. I'm using all kinds of sound effects.
For another year, guaranteed.
Oh my goodness,
Very
that's
exciting.
I'm so excited about that.
Yes,
I'm thrilled because I feel like we always have good conversations. More so because you help lead them, not because of
no,
me,
you
so.
help lead.
I love it. So. With that good news, great news, I'll say. With that great news under our belts, let's jump in to transgenderism because obviously a hot topic. Everybody's talking about it. Sometimes I think we shy away from difficult conversations, but I don't. I
think
you know me.
You confront the issue where it is.
Out of love, out of respect, always. But I saw a quote, and I will butcher this quote. I'm just going to say it up front. Okay. But I did see this a few years ago, and I'm talking like 15 years ago. So before, a lot of this direction that we've been heading in as a society started shifting, there was a quote I saw, and I was like, oh, this is really good. This speaks to me. And it was that when you love somebody, you tell them the truth, right? You don't let people do whatever they want because you love them. That's not love, right? Love is helping them to, first of all, we know as Catholics, love is introducing them into a relationship with the Lord. If they don't already have one, right? If they do, then it's deepening their relationship with the Lord. That's love. And so with that comes some beautiful closeness with God. And here's the thing. When we talk about transgenderism, when we talk about anything, just you name the topic. What it all comes down to is God knows. That's pretty neat. Are you hearing that? That's kind of cool. When it all comes down to is, what does the Lord say? And here's why it comes down to that. Because he knows what's best. I don't know about you, but definitely me. I don't always know what's best, even when I think I know what's best.
Yeah. It's a humbling experience.
Yeah.
When you're talking about like the parental kind of role, I always think about it with like, well, it's funny because I don't have a kid, but I do have a dog. And
I've got a couple. You need one? Not dogs.
I'll babysit. But
there you go.
I just like think of like the child, or like if you have a pet or something, like you might be like restraining them from doing something, like, okay, don't cross the street because there's a car coming.
Right.
And they're upset because they want to cross that road right then.
Right.
Or whatever, like, or if you're a dog trying to get something out of its mouth and it's refusing.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. But just like you're doing it out of love, but the perspective of the child or your pet or anything like that, they don't understand like your view on like how you're trying to protect them out of love. And I think that kind of merges almost into, the topic of, transgenderism. Yeah. How we're supposed to approach that as Catholics and what you were saying about it. So I mean, transgenderism is not, there's a whole like, there's just different perspectives in it. Yeah. And there's objective truth and subjective truth. And I think that's what it honestly comes down to. Yeah. But we're saying the truth out of love.
Of course. And I think a lot of people, so first of all, there's a lot of Catholics that don't even know the stance on the Catholic Church with the sex reassignment surgery or with identifying as certain things or using different pronouns. Like there's a lot out there when you see media and people's opinions. And my goodness, I think you Googled it before. Yes. You like Googled it. And it's interesting because even when you pull up Google, the definition of gender has changed really over the last couple of years, to be quite honest. So that was interesting. Now, maybe let's look at that for just a real quick as an example of there's so much information out there and it seems to always be changing, right? But there's one thing I know for sure. Truth is truth, and that doesn't change. But sometimes our perspectives or our views or ways that we look at things change. So what did you find when you Googled gender?
So originally, I was like, okay, I need to look up what people are saying. If you Google gender, what's the definition that comes up? Yeah. And it says, the male sex or the female sex, especially when considered with reference to social and cultural differences rather than biological ones, or one of a range of other identities that do not correspond to established ideas of male and female. And I was like, I don't know if that's always been I don't think that's always been the definition.
And that was, you just put it into a Google search and that's what came out, right?
Right. Okay. And then looked again at some other dictionaries, other sources, and it seems like in more of the 1800s, the definition was derived from the Latin root of genius. It says from geno, and it means to beget or to be born. Yeah. And I think that also speaks to the Catholic Church too, and how we, in Genesis, like man and woman, and like how God, begot, and then later on in the New Testament, how God begot his son, Jesus, right? Mm-hmm. So I think it's very interesting, like comparing those two and how it's changed.
For sure. Well, I'll tell you, I'm in a class called The Genesis of Gender at Notre Dame. And it's being taught by a professor who's very well known. And actually, that's the title of her book. So you can Google that if you want. It's been incredible. And in the first few chapters, she talks about the feminism waves, like that it's come in waves, right? Sometimes when you say the word feminism, you're going to get a strong reaction one way or the other, right? So that's another one. We could probably talk about that at some point too. But it does talk about like the first waves. The first wave of feminism really was all about kind of just, hey, I'm a human being and I think I have the right to do things like vote, be able to do basic human functions that men can do. And now kind of in the 80s where it was more of a kind of not really a sex revolution, because that was more in the 60s, but the feminist wave in the 80s was more about sex wars or gender wars. And so by the 90s, that definition of gender really started to, the now famous phraseology of that gender is a social construct really gained traction in the 90s. So it started to gain traction, I should say. So it's, this viewpoint has been around for a little bit. It's nothing new, although it's really come into the forefront in the last couple of years, I would say, last 2 years for sure. And you get everything from these people mocking Catholic nuns at the Los Angeles Dodgers games,
that made me so frustrated.
And being honored in their it wasn't. What was the public? It was their state house or something. I don't remember exactly, but they were getting an award which I'm very confused at. And I did hear that the local bishop did show up and was voicing concern and stuff like that, which is great. It was wonderful.
A representative.
Really thrilled to hear that, hey, you're mocking us. What if they showed up in like saris or something that, that wouldn't be allowed for sure. Right. But they're openly mocking our faith, our Savior, Mary, the Mother of God, our nuns, all kinds of stuff. So you have everything from that to there's a documentary out called "What is a Woman?"
I love that documentary. If you haven't watched it, please do. I believe it's still
no matter where you sit. Twitter actually was on fire on Twitter.
Yes, I watched it through Twitter.
Oh, you did? Okay.
And I don't know. They kept it, so they were running it this past weekend, mm-hmm. and I don't know if it's still.
Yeah, I don't know.
But I think they're trying to get the views up because I think it's almost at I know it's 170 million.
Oh,
at least.
Wow. I remember reading about it when it first was coming out, and even like Rotten Tomatoes and all the people, they wouldn't even watch it. They wouldn't even give it any credence that it was a thing. And this is, if you don't know, it's done by Matt Walsh, who's a Catholic and a very famous internet personality. So you can have those two extremes, right? And you have all those opinions when we talk about like the genesis of gender and everything, but and feminism and what that looks like or what it should look like. But what we're gonna talk about today really all boils down to what is our identity. When I first got here, by the way, at the cathedral, this is now 3.5 years ago, which is pretty crazy to say. But when I first got here, our COO, our Chief Operating Officer, asked me a question in the interview. And she said, what do you see as the biggest issue for young people today? Now, again, this is 3.5 years ago. So I said, it's identity. For sure. No, I didn't even hesitate, didn't even bat an eye. I saw it coming. I was already just being with youth and listening. That's the best thing you could do, by the way, is just listen. And then you can enter into a conversation that way. But I knew identity was going to be the biggest thing. And what this is all going to boil down to today is, who are you? Really, who are you? What makes you you? And we're going to talk about that. So I'm going to pull back the curtain already. By the way, your identity is that you are a son or daughter of God.
Right. It's pretty simple.
That's your
Clear
identity.
Cut.
That is literally your identity. Everything else is like an adjective. It kind of describes I'm a son of the Lord, of the King, of God, right? I'm also a father. Is that my full identity? If I just say I'm a father, that's my identity. Well, no. That's something that describes a portion of me. Yeah. Sure. I'm a basketball player. Is that my identity? I am a student. Is that my identity? I won't say it. I was just going to say my GPA. It's pretty good.
I mean,
is that my identity?
No, it's not.
So what is my, and this is where we get a little bit lost, I think, is that we forget or we never even knew who we were created to be. That's where it stems from. Right.
It's a disorder. It's like a dissatisfaction.
Yep.
And it comes from the disorder of the fall and how we're still trying to seek that. And we grasp for like straws, basically, to try to figure out, who am I? Where do I belong? Which group do I belong to? And that's when I think younger people especially are putting them there. If they feel like they have certain attributes of a certain group, they start applying that to themselves. Then they start becoming more ingratiated with that group.
Sure. Or where they're accepted too, by the way, where they feel accepted is a big thing. Especially, I really noticed that in high school, maybe more so than middle school, for sure. Yeah, for sure. And so high school is really kind of that area where if you feel a sense of belonging to a group, you're
sticking with that.
Yeah. You, whether you really believe it or not, it does become who you are. I'm telling you this out of witnessing this on a regular basis. So I'm not speaking out of theory. I'm speaking out of practical application, what I've seen. I do want to say that when we talk about all this, that the church definitely teaches that all people, regardless of who they are or what they identify as are loved. All people are loved. All people. People had a hard time with me talking about this 30 years ago when I was a teen and I was like, hey, I think God loved Hitler and loves Hitler. And people really did not like hearing that at all because it really struck a chord. But it's true. Hitler was and is a child of the king, right? Now, whether he accepted that or not, that's on him. But regardless, every human that's ever been created and everyone that will ever be created is loved equally by the Lord. And so I really got some fire when I said God loves Hitler as much as he loves the Pope. And people were like, what?
It is kind of, it's like almost ironic in some ways. But yeah, just like that mercy extends to everyone. So we should be extending that same mercy and love to everyone
don't
else.
disqualify that statement. Don't try to quantify that God loves one group or person over another. He does not. That's the church's teaching. And I'll show you it if you need to see it. I'll show you in the catechism. I'll show you in Scripture.
Yeah, no partiality towards one's neighbor.
There we go. And so we know this. So don't fight that. Okay, just accept that that's a truth. It's not. Sometimes people get mad at me because I speak the truth like that, and I say, whoa. You're actually not mad at me. You're mad at the truth. So you can deal with that. Like if you got an issue with that, and you might, and that's okay, but you go to God with that. Like. I'm just speaking what I know is truth, right? And that's another issue.
Yes.
Like people have, well, what is the truth, right?
Or my truth.
My truth.
And then when you start talking to people about the truth, they feel attacked because it's their truth.
Right.
So they start feeling like it's a personal attack rather than, so they start really applying it to themselves.
Which is why I always, when I enter into those conversations, I say basically kind of what I already said in that, listen, I'm not speaking about my truth and I'm not speaking about your truth. What I am speaking about is the truth from God. It's not my opinion and it's not your opinion. So we're in agreement here.
Right.
It's not either one of ours opinions, right? It's just, this is God's truth, not even opinion. This is the truth. And so whether I subscribe to that or not, that's on me. Same goes for you. Absolutely. So if you're upset at that, I'm cool with you. I'm cool with you, but I love you, and I want to tell you about how the Lord changed me and things that I didn't think were true. Death penalty, I was for it before, like different things. And when I came into the fullness of what the truth was, it wasn't like, because I knew what the church's stance was, but I didn't agree with it in certain circumstances.
Okay.
Right? Like rape and murder. I was like, yeah, no, definitely death penalty. But then when I understood the fullness of the teaching of the church and of how God sees us and loves each and every one of us, that radically changed me. And so if that can happen to me, I know it can happen to anybody because I'm real stubborn, right? But also we have to see that it's not an argument between people. It's an argument between the person and the truth. And that's for all of us. That's for me too, right? So to take it personally, I try not to. There's times I do, but when I do, I step back and I say, oh, it's not against me. It's not about me. It's about their struggle and their wrestle with the truth. You know who wrestled with the truth? Was Pontius Pilate.
Oh.
Right? He asked Jesus the question, what is truth? Right?
What is truth?
What is truth? He's literally asking Jesus this as he's about to crucify him, right? Mm-hmm. What is truth? He was wondering what his truth was and what Jesus' truth was and what other people's truth was. This is not new. I know it's a new phrase for some people. It's not new. That's my truth. Well, hold on. Pontius Pilate said the same thing.
What is the truth?
What is the truth, right?
What is truth?
So when we speak of this, first of all, we speak of this out of love. The church teaches God loves everyone equally, period, right? No matter what. And that we're all made in the image and likeness of him, right? Now, that's a whole other class if anybody wants to take that on God's gender, if he has one or if he doesn't, right? Well, he says his likeness. Okay. Again, that is a long discussion, one that we're not going to have today, but just know that we are made in the image and likeness of God, okay? But also, we do have to say that the church doesn't condone transgenderism, right? It doesn't say that to have sex reassignment surgery or gender conformity or gender, the term is escaping me, where they gender affirmation surgery, I think it's called.
I think so.
I could be wrong, so I apologize if I'm not saying the terms properly. But just know that that is something that the church teaches that you can't change. Right, that gender is a gift from God, and that you were born either male or female. Even hermaphrodites, that because that's an important. Sometimes we just like to use extreme measures, right? Like, well, abortion. What about the people who get raped and all? That is such a small. We use the smallest percentage argument to try to disprove the whole. So right now, when we're talking about like hermaphrodites, such a small percentage, and it's not even. It's so minute. It's so small. But even in those instances, they are still born either male or female. Like the gender is given to them. They might have both, but the gender is given to them. So I don't like using those small little tiny, the 0.00 percentage to try to disprove a whole thing. But we do understand that gender is a gift from the Lord. It's a gift. And you get to accept it or not.
I mean, it goes back to the begotten. God gave his gift of his son.
Yeah.
Begot his son. So it kind of is the same ideology, kind of.
Yeah.
That he would, give us this gift.
Right.
And make us in his image and likeness, like as you said.
Exactly. So while the church obviously doesn't condone transgenderism, it does offer support for those who are struggling with gender identity issues, right? So it's not as if the church is standing there going, no, we don't believe it. Conform or go. Whoa. That's not, I have never experienced that in working for the church ever once. In fact, I would dare say people that work for the church are more compassionate than people that don't. Much more compassionate than people that don't. I've seen both sides. I've lived both in those worlds, right? And what I would say is the church is so for the people. The church doesn't want a single soul to not go to heaven. Not a single soul. We want them all. Mm-hmm. We want everybody. Not to pad our numbers, not to pad our pocketbooks. We want everybody to go to heaven because we actually care about every single person. I think that's forgotten. And that's sad. If you're listening to this and you feel alone or you're struggling with these issues, you are not alone, period. If you need somebody to talk to, you come and knock on my door and I will listen. I know I talk a lot on the podcast, but I'm also actually a good listener too. Holly's a great listener too.
Rick's a really good listener.
So if you feel like you got nobody to talk to about this stuff, or you feel alienated, even if you aren't having those issues, but you feel alienated by people who do, and you don't know how to deal with that too, please, we want to have conversations. We don't want this to be kind of like, hey, here's the answer, and then boom, that's it. We wash our hands clean of anybody that doesn't agree with us. That's not what the church teaches, right? Now, being on college campus, I'm certain you see this issue on a daily basis.
Oh, yes. All the time. In my major, I'm in a very, as I would say, quote unquote, like minority of the campus. There were 5 people in our cohort, now 3.
Yes. Out
of the whole entire campus. And I just definitely experience this almost on a frontline basis with education.
Oh, yeah.
I would say my, teacher goes by they, them, one of my main supervisor. How do you approach that? I definitely struggle with certain things like that. And then also there's a question of like, oh, well, I love these people. Like, it doesn't matter. Like that part, like the love of them doesn't matter. Right. But I don't want to support an ideology that I don't support. So it's always very difficult. I see many clubs on campus supporting, the identity, like the LGBTQ identities and stuff like that. I have friends that are a part of that community. I love them equally. Disagree on a lot of topics,
for sure.
We can have civil conversations. I know Catholics that have the proclivity to be in that community too, that both act on it and don't act on it. So if you're listening, I definitely have some friends or resources for that. And I love everyone the same.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter almost. Yeah. It matters, but it doesn't matter.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It totally does. So I was listening to a podcast. I love podcasts, but Catholic Answers has a great podcast, and they spoke about this issue, and it talks about regarding preferred pronouns and how do you approach that, right? And the advice that was given was, I would advise avoiding that problem and just call the person by the preferred name. Mm-hmm. So he gave an example of somebody who called in who from a man who had a sex change surgery and now identified living as a woman, and he referred to himself as Mary, right? And he followed kind of this a misguided approach, right? It would have been a real short conversation.
Right.
But instead, he didn't let minor details kind of derail his own witness to him. And because of that, he got to speak to him about what the role of his life was to be in terms of, like, you're supposed to live a chaste life outside of marriage, right? And what the church sees as marriage. And eventually, the man gave his life over to Christ and was won for Christ, right? So I love his advice of, he just said, regarding preferred pronouns, I would advise avoiding that problem and just call them by their name.
That's what I've
Whatever
done.
They tell you their name is, just call them by it. But it's not affirming any of those pronouns either, right?
Time.
So if somebody says, the pronouns, what's your name? And there's something personal about your name too. Now you could go in and say, well, what's the name you were given at birth?
That might cause some.
That'll cause,
contention.
I promise you, that'll cause tension and won't allow for a fruitful conversation. That's just anger. That's down the road. It's almost like you have to start a conversation first instead of ending it before it ever begins. So I think on a lot of these things, we kind of choose those things, and that's our battle. I'm going to battle them on this thing. Well, you're going to lose the war before it ever begins, right? So we have to be mindful,
right? With still adhering to our views as Catholics too.
Correct.
Right. And I think Father Mike mentioned about going back to pronouns too.
Yeah.
If you say their preferred pronouns, then it's affirming it. Like you said, it's affirming them.
Right.
But you're also like you're kind of letting it out almost that, like, you don't also, like, you're questioning what the truth is.
Right.
Right. Because if you affirm that on your end, you're also saying there must be some subjectivity to this.
Right.
Right. So it's kind of, I think it's walking a thin line right there, but I would just urge our listeners to consider that and kind of evaluate, how
that's
they approach that.
Yeah, that's good. Again, I like that answer of just call them by their name.
I like the name.
Yeah.
Easy.
So people change their name all the time, by the way, even if it's not a gender changing name.
Yeah.
People legally change their name a lot. So,
or the middle name becomes the first name.
Yeah.
Or they shorten their name.
Right.
Or something
Right.
Like that.
So if somebody, clearly, like this man who spoke as a man, or maybe had tendencies to speak more like a woman, right? Or what we think a woman sounds like, right? So calls himself Mary. If he just went off on that topic, it just would have ended right there.
That's so true.
Right. But at the same time, like, changed his name. Well, do we do that to everybody then? Well, by the way, my name is Richard, but I prefer to go by Rick.
Right.
So are you going to tell me, well, okay, what's the name you were given at birth? That's what I'm going to call you.
Right. It would have to apply to everyone if you use that.
Yeah, it's if that's the hill you're going to die on, right?
You have to ask everyone else.
You got to ask everybody. So just to show no partiality, right?
Yeah.
So like the Lord doesn't show any partiality towards anyone, right? But again, this could be a much longer conversation, but I think this is a good spot to kind of wrap it up. But be mindful and be reminded that this is all done out of love, not out of sense of me being right or Holly being right or the church being right. It's about what God knows is right. Right. And again, sometimes that doesn't jive with us, but that doesn't change what God knows is right.
Yes.
So let's lean into that a little bit, right?
And lastly, like, I remember looking up on YouTube an apologist who said when you're arguing for the faith, don't do it out of your own personal anger, and don't do it out of like trying to prove to them that you are right. Rather do it out of love. Like we've been, that's kind of the theme, I think, of.
I hope it's been the theme.
Yes.
I hope people have understood that.
That's the, I think, correct disposition to go about it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Holly, I want to thank you for entering this conversation with me, because I know it's not always easy for people to give a viewpoint on this without the fear of being canceled or, for whatever. But if there's one thing I know, I cannot, at the end of my days, stand before the Lord and just, if he asked me, why didn't you enter into this conversation out of love? So I was afraid, Lord, or what? I can't do that. So I would encourage you all, pray about this topic, but not just this topic, like all topics that lead people to or away from the Lord. That is why we're here, and that's why we're having this conversation. We really appreciate you. Maybe you want to share this with somebody. Maybe you're afraid to, but that's okay too. Please, if you do feel that urge to share, please do share. Otherwise, we will see you next time on Happy Hour. Oh, the old music.